Hello, everyone. This is Mark Plaster, Senior Executive Editor of Emergency Physicians Monthly, and you're listening to EP Talk, a place where ER docs come to talk about things that are innovations and things that are important to us. And sometimes they're personal, sometimes they're professional. And today, my guests are from Safer Medical Products, Craig Randall, Rick Bluebaugh, Misty Donovan, and Todd Baker, and they have produced an interesting product for the market. I'm always pleased that Emergency Physicians Monthly has been able to be an incubator of sorts for new and innovative emergency physicians, and this is a good example of it. Safer Medical Products has some things we're going to talk about today about special shields for intubation and BiPAP, CPAP, and use in nebulizer therapy. So, guys, thank you for coming. I was going to say ladies and gentlemen, but friends, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Your product kind of jumped out in my experience just today, in fact, because I'm a big fan of Candace Owens, and it tells you a little bit about my politics, but nevertheless, but Candace is an asthma patient, and she had an interesting experience with the fact that she got into trouble and went to her asthma clinic for treatment and requested a nebulizer. And they said that they couldn't give it to her because of COVID. She's not COVID positive, but they didn't want to give her a nebulizer treatment. And as a result, they said the only place we can do this is to send you to the ER. So the next thing she knew, there were 5 ambulance providers they were going to take her by ambulance over to the ER so that they could provide a nebulizer there. And she said she didn't want to do that. She didn't want to ride an ambulance and all the hoopla associated with that. So it turned out that she had to go to her car and have a nebulizer treatment in the car and then come back. So this whole COVID thing has completely changed our ability to provide a baseline therapy that we've been doing for 20 years, and that is nebulizers. We do them all the time. I'll let whoever wants to speak first to go rather than call on you, but set the stage for why Safer Medical Products was even invented.
Well, I tell you, Mark, that story, there's no telling how many thousands of times that's been repeated since this pandemic began, both here in the U.S. and internationally as well. And the sad part of it is, as emergency medicine providers, if she had shown up to our emergency department, guess what? We couldn't give her a neb there either. And that's what hit us. So when all of this started in March, we're located in the Midwest, and so we didn't have much, if any COVID going on back in March, April. We had just a touch, but not a whole lot. But immediately, we're not able to give nebulizer therapy. We're not able to give BiPAP, CPAP therapy, and of course, airway intervention with intubation and other things became much more problematic. And so we noticed that our patients were getting a higher level of care in the back of an ambulance or at their home than they're getting in the emergency department. And we didn't even have COVID, really. So this is, pre-COVID, of course, as you know, we're inundated with it now, but
yeah,
back then we're thinking, okay, there's got to be a better way. Our standard of care for emergency medicine, for what we've all been doing the past 20 years, just fell off the cliff. And we are not able to treat people like we were 6 months ago. Our nebulizer therapy, still to this day in the emergency department, is 10 puffs on an MDI. And like I said, you can get better care than that at home. And so we thought there has to be a better way. This is not going to work. And once again, this has nothing to do with a patient that has COVID. This is a 9-year-old kid with asthma. 75-year-old COPDer that's been at home and has no exposure, but it doesn't matter. You have to treat them the same. And so we thought this is not going to work. And so we started researching it. We're not academicians. We're community emergency medicine providers, 3 docs and a nurse practitioner who works with us. And so we started researching, brainstorming, trying to figure out a better way to be able to get patients the care, not only the care that they need, but the care that they've had for the past 20 years. The surprise on a patient's face when their clinic sends them to the ER and we say, well, actually, you could have gotten better care at the clinic. As you imagine, that doesn't go over well as far as that goes.
No, not at all. And when this kind of caught everybody off guard because when this first showed up, everybody was talking about negative pressure rooms. Well, geez, how many of us have multiple negative pressure rooms, even in the emergency department, let alone in a clinic or in some other setting? And so. We had in the ER where I work that we tried to modify several of these by having these big, heavy negative pressure blowers, and it was so loud that I would have to turn them off to talk to the patient, and then turn them back on again, so that nobody caught me in the room, with the negative pressure blower going on. And you guys were able to build a better mousetrap. Why don't you and why don't you tell me, well, before we go on to that, I want to hear a little bit about, I'm looking at each of your descriptions, and you guys, several of you have military experience as well. So I'm going to ask each one of you to sort of take a little second here and introduce yourself. Craig Randall, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I did my schooling through ATSU, and like many military docs, I went on an HPSP scholarship program, and I was active duty Air Force for 4 years, and did a flight surgery for a couple of those years, and then as an ER attending for a couple of those years, and then ended up coming out here to Branson after my active duty time.
Rick Blueball, you want to tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm just a farm boy that was fortunate enough to get to go to medical school and to do emergency medicine for a career. From Oklahoma originally, medical school at Oklahoma State, as well as residency. I'm actually on the road now. I'm not with my team. I'm taking a cow to University of Missouri vet school. So I raise Black Angus cow breeding stock, and I've got a cow in need of some foot care that I'm actually on the road to the university right now hauling a cow. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, have fun when you get to Columbia. That's where I graduated from medical school. So that's great. Misty Donovan, tell me a little about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Misty Donovan. I'm a nurse practitioner that works in the emergency department. Mainly my background since I was about 19, so 20-something years now, I've worked in the emergency department. Started there as a unit secretary, worked there as a tech, and then went through nursing school and just kind of worked my way up as a nurse practitioner. So, and I've worked with these guys for quite a while now. So. Wow.
And Todd Baker?
Yes, sir. So I'm from Texarkana, Texas, and I went to medical school at University of Arkansas. And like Dr. Randall, military guy, I went to the Army and trained at Fort Hood, spent some time with 2nd Cavalry Regiment, and then up at Madigan, up at Fort Lewis, teaching residents for a while, and then spent 15 months as the chief of Baghdad ER back in OIF 07-09, and then came to Branson from there.
Interesting. Okay. So you were with the cache there in Baghdad.
Yes, absolutely. 86 cache.
86 cache. I flew I was with the Marine Corps in Babylon for the first tour, and out in Korean Village the second tour. So I don't think we ever flew anybody into Baghdad. We flew to some of the other caches that were out there, but we certainly were happy to have you guys there. So thank you for your service for sure. Tell me, okay, now our listeners now don't know what your product, since they're not seeing it. So explain. Who wants to take a first crack at explaining what your shield pathogen containment system is? Let's talk about your respiratory shield. You have an endo shield and a respiratory shield. Who wants to tell me about the respiratory shield?
Sure. So this all sort of started back in March, April. I was actually having dinner with a friend of mine who's a dentist, and at that time, of course, they were just shutting down and getting restarted again from the initial shutdown from COVID. And he was talking about this oral suction device that they were using to try to mitigate, exposure. That was essentially a big negative pressure vacuum that they would place next to the patient's face to try to pull away any pathogens that the patient was exhaling. And I started thinking, why couldn't we use something similar like that in the ER so we can get back to doing what we were, supposed to be doing and treating patients properly. And so I discussed it with the group here, and we decided that we could sort of start modifying things a little bit using some existing platforms out there from these dental oral suctions, and modify it to be able to work in the ER. And the first product we came up with was the Endo Shield, which is basically an innovation shield, and we kind of expanded it from there onto the respiratory mask. So the respiratory mask is a mask that attaches to the outside of a nebulizer or a BiPAP or a CPAP, and it is attached to a negative suction device that goes through a staged filtering system. We have devices that can either go through ULPA or HEPA filters, as well as other devices that can also include ultraviolet light. And so what it does is it basically attaches to the outside of these existing BiPAP and nebulizer masks that every hospital uses. And it basically helps to pull away and extract all the exhaled air that's coming from the patients, thereby decreasing the viral particle load that's actually being out in the air.
And for our listeners who can maybe understand that, but if you went to their website, Safer Medical Products, SAFER, medical products website, you'll actually see this, and it's incredibly simple. And these are the best products. That's when basically on the respiratory shield, it's like a shield over the shield over the CPAP or the. At first, I thought I was actually looking at the CPAP device, and it's actually just something that clamps onto the hose over the top and has negative pressure for that area right on the outside of the face, over the front of the face, which is perfect, because then you don't have a big heavy product, a big heavy shield, or there's a lot of different ways to go about this, but certainly this is the one that I can see would be the most easily adaptable to the equipment that we're currently using. And the fact that is at least a couple of you guys are flight surgeons tells me that you've figured out that it has to be pretty small, and it's not going to be able to be a big heavy bonnet. I suspect you guys have flown in the backs of pretty small helicopters, Black Hawks and others, that you can't get a huge piece of equipment in there. It's going to have to be something small. So if you're listening to this and you want to see what we're talking about, go to safeermedicalproducts.com and you'll actually see this. And it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And tell me about the Endo Shield. Can you, if I were to look at that, it's sort of a shield over the face and has then has ports on the side. Is that the?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's basically another mask or shield that has a hole in the middle of it, and through that hole in the middle that you can actually put a video laryngoscope, such as a glide scope blade, and it just seats down in there just perfect. So then you are holding the video laryngoscope blade like you normally would. You would go ahead and start to intubate just like you normally would. The only difference is that on top of the video laryngoscope blade, you have this shield that's sitting there. And the shield is attached to, again, the same negative pressure device, the same vacuum system that is used for the respiratory mask. Goes through the same filters and everything. And the nice thing about this shield is that, when we first started this with COVID and everybody was trying to use the big boxes that you put over people, or people were even buying like ponchos on Amazon or putting shower curtains over people's faces. Those
Right.
things were really just cumbersome. They didn't work. They got in the way. They made it very difficult. It was hard to get good first pass success. And, those quickly got thrown to the side of the bedside. The nice thing about this shield is that it actually moves with your hand, because it is literally just sitting on top of the laryngoscope blade. So it's not large and intrusive. It's just big enough to cover the patient's face, and so it's catching any sort of respiratory droplets that are coming out. It's got ports on either side that you can put the suction to, so you can change that depending on which side is more convenient for you, as well as it's got a very soft spot of plastic over on the side that you put the actual endotracheal tube through. This was key to us to make sure that this wasn't going to interfere with intubation. And so it's got a very soft, pliable plastic that has slits through it that you can just go ahead and intubate through, that doesn't cause any difficulty or doesn't get in the way of the tube as it's passing. And the whole thing is, see-through, so you can have good visualization. And the edges are very, very soft plastic, so in case you actually touch the patient, it doesn't cause any patient harm.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think that most of us are starting to realize that now you're seeing a surge. Some areas are actually seeing COVID start to diminish. But there is one reality that I think we've all come to realize, and that is that this is not likely to really go away. We're going to be thinking about respiratory pathogens, whether it's COVID or something else. That's going to be on the radar screen for now on, from now on. And I think that right now we're thinking, oh, COVID. But even when COVID is less prevalent, or if it's not so prevalent in your area, these kinds of products are going to be here to stay. And it's going to be very, very important that we have ready access to these when patients come in. It's not like you have 30 minutes to set something up, and a busy ER. You're going to have to be able to just grab something very quickly, and like with the respiratory shield, it snaps right onto the CPAP. You don't want to be running around the emergency department searching for the box or searching for a piece of equipment that's not readily available. And the beauty, like I say, the simplicity of both of these is that they're relatively small. They can be easily accessible and easily adaptable. So this is in my definition of the better mousetrap. That's for sure.
Well, the vacuums, the negative pressure systems that we're utilizing with this, there's multiple ones that depending on what the user wants, what design, cordless, corded, an aviation model. They're small and they can fit in a lot of small areas, small places, on crash carts, in a drawer. Mark, a perfect example, I was working in the ED the other day, and a paramedic called and said, hey, I've got a known COVID positive. I just picked her up. I've got her on CPAP in the back of my rig. Her sats are still 50 to 60%. We're going to have to intubate her. And, I was just thinking, and I know, of course, she's wearing PPE in the back of that ambulance, of course, but I'm just thinking this system would be perfect, will be perfect for her to use, both the respiratory shield with the CPAP, followed by, if they do have to take the airway, followed by the Endo Shield, just in keeping her safer in the back of that ambulance, right there, filtering the air. And I think pre-hospital, just like you were saying, even once we get out of the COVID era eventually, influenza, tuberculosis, whatever the next SARS virus is,
Right.
both pre and post hospital. This is going to become standard of care internationally is our thought process.
Yeah, I think that everybody, one of the things that we'll be writing about in the future issues of Emergency Physicians Monthly is what are the changes, what's the take home from this pandemic for how we practice. And one of the things that is universal that we have said is that we're probably not going back to a model of a filthy ER. It's always been kind of, almost an ER joke that you could walk in with your scrubs filthy, and you could do all kinds of procedures that would get viruses and bacteria all over your scrubs and whatnot, and then go to the grocery store on the way home and touch everything in the store and go home and never take your scrubs off. You can see people walking around with this, and I think that one of the take homes of COVID is going to be that we're going to treat the emergency department more like the operating room has always been treated. And that is to make sure that you're wearing, you're isolating what you wear and what you, how you treat the patient in the emergency department. And you don't drag that out. And I think there's just going to be more of a recognition of contagious disease, COVID, SARS, whatever it is, that we want to make sure that we're not spewing all over the walls and all over the bed and all over our clothing and taking home. And so I suspect that even when COVID has kind of settled into our bad memories, we're still going to be thinking about, we need to keep this place cleaner. And this is the kind of thing that I think is going to become a permanent fixture in emergency departments long after COVID has gone away.
Yes, Mark, and you actually early on was talking about negative pressure rooms, and one of the ways that we look at this device is it is given negative pressure without the negative pressure room. So for those smaller hospitals that are limited on their negative pressure rooms, or they don't have funding to go and develop new rooms in their emergency departments, again, the system is giving them that negative pressure without having the additional negative pressure rooms.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if we have I'm part of the University of Maryland group, and in our department we have a negative pressure room. Okay, but what happens when you have 3, 4, 5 patients that are potentially PUIs? A person under investigation. You're kind of stuck. What else are you going to do? And this is an opportunity for you to be able to take any room, any patient with a respiratory issue, and make them safe from you, and also safe from all the patients that are going to be coming in after them into that same room. So this is absolutely an amazing. I love it when people who do things, and it's obvious from all of your life experiences that you guys have been doing a lot. Flight surgeons and cash doctors, and when I say cash, I mean a combat support hospital, and that you guys have been doing some really interesting stuff. And Misty, your master's in science is going to be very, very valuable to be able to translate this into your colleagues on the nursing staff side. So I really, really admire how you've taken a very practical approach to a very difficult problem, and that's simply amazing.
We actually work in multiple ERs around the local area here, and they all have their own unique challenges. And again, this is our whole goal with this, was to try to come up with just a safer way to do medicine. That's how we came up with our name of Safer Medical Products. So we wanted to get back to doing things safely and be able to treat people like we want to treat them and like they should be treated. Going out to your car to get a nebulizer treatment obviously is not ideal in any world. And even nowadays, like we're still not allowed to even treat a 2-year-old that comes in with croup without getting a COVID test, because we can't give them a racemic epinephrine treatment. And
Right.
So that's not safe. I mean, that's it's one of those things where we just need to be able to get back to doing things the way they should be done, and we're just trying to figure out a way to do that.
And you know, it's interesting. The reason why I mentioned Branson, I wanted you to talk about Branson a little bit, is because Branson is a interesting city from the standpoint of it's small, and yet you have this massive influx of people from literally all over I would say all over the world, but certainly all over the United States, bringing in all kinds of things. And so you really have to um, look at how you're going to protect not only them, yourself from them, but them from each other. And so you have this little slice of heaven down there in southern Missouri that could be a real super spreader if you don't handle it properly. So I can see the challenges of being in a small hospital that sees millions of potential patients every year.
Oh yeah, a large percentage of our patient population aren't really from the area. Most, like I said, we have a population of 10,000 and 8 million visitors. So
That's crazy. That's crazy.
you can imagine how our patient population fluctuates. And so again, we're just trying to come up with a safer way to do things. Even things such as just swabbing. We've managed to come up with new ways to use all this. If nurses have to go swab patients, they got to expose them. And so this is something that we can even use this while we're doing that. For general surgery, if they need to do EGDs and scope people, they can do that through the Endo Shield. And there's all sorts of ways to try to make this safer and bring it back to the way we used to do things.
I have a practical question here. Are these disposable? They're not inexpensive, but they're not super expensive. Do you clean them, sterilize them, just clean them off, or do you discard them?
We're designing them to be single use, just like a BiPAP mask or a nebulizer mask.
Okay.
And so you would dispose them. It'll come as a kit that's got the anesthesia tubing in it to hook to the vacuum. And of course the vacuum's a one-time, purchase. Then just like any of the other airway devices or masks we use, like a GlideScope blade or whatever, like a bag valve mask product, if that makes sense.
Right. Gotcha. Any saved rounds for this? I want to make everyone aware that they can find out more about this by going to safermedicalproducts.com. And like I said, it's a simple device. You'll look at it and go, I could have thought of that. But it takes people who are actually have some field experience, and I would even say some flight experience, to understand that sometimes smaller is better, and to be able to do these things safely. And now that you'll see it, I think you'll look at it and go, oh yeah, this is something that we need, and it would convert each one of our rooms into negative pressure rooms. So that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you guys for joining me and explaining this. I hope all the listeners will go to safermedicalproducts.com and take a look at what's going on there, and give you some feedback, and I'll bet you give you some business, because this is an innovation born of practical experience, and I'm sure that it would improve their safety and their assurance. So thank you for joining me today. And for all of our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you'll try Safer Medical Products. Take care.